Okay. All right. Nashville Wives. Intimate interviews with the wives of today's hottest country superstars, Mrs. George Jones and Tom Carter. From one of Nashville's most prominent wives and a top journalist comes a revealing, intimate look inside the lives and marriages of major country music heartthrobs. Country music is celebrated for the honesty of its lyrics, and in this book, 15 outspoken Nashville wives talk openly for the first time about life with their famous and infamous husbands, how they met, fell in love, rose to stardom, and coped with the pressures of show business, success, and failure. How did Garth Brooks' wife handle the public disclosure of his adultery? Why is Kenny Rogers' bride optimistic about their marital future when she is the sixth Mrs. Rogers? How did Mrs. Alan Jackson respond to the rumors of her husband's romantic involvement with one of Nashville's foremost female singers? Was it difficult for Mrs. Charlie Pride to maintain an all-is-well appearance when her husband was undergoing psychiatric treatment? Also, the sixth Mrs. Merrill Haggard confesses to her drug addiction. Mrs. Ronnie Dunn of Brooks and Dunn talks exclusively about her husband's past violent outbursts. Mrs. Billy Ray Cyrus discloses why she was forced to keep her marriage secret from the public. Mrs. Glenn Campbell recalls her husband's conversion from cocaine to born-again Christianity and more. In Nashville Wives, Mrs. George Nancy Jones, wife of the most critically acclaimed country vocalist who shares her own amazing story of Nashville's secrets and legends, and Tom Carter, author of several country music bestsellers, provide a gritty, unprecedented account of the men who make America's favorite music and the women behind them. Mrs. George Nancy Jones has been the doyen of Nashville's wives. Tom Carter is a Nashville journalist who has collaborated on autobiographies of major country superstars, including Glenn Campbell, Ralph Emery, Reba McEntire, and George Jones. Acknowledgements. I'm indebted to my husband George Jones for putting up with all the time I took away from managing his career to work on my own. He's as understanding as he is talented. I obviously appreciate the cooperation of some very busy wives. One can't write a book about Nashville wives without the involvement of those wives. Amid the pressures of maintaining a marriage and rearing children, the wives met with me or my co-author Tom Carter on many occasions. Thank you, ladies. Special thanks to Debbie Dobler, my business manager and friend, and old rule says one person can't be both. Debbie proves that rule is wrong. I love her like a sister. Thanks to Evelyn Schreier, who has been George's and my publicist for more years than either of us cares to remember. Her resignation from publicity came on the very day the first draft of this book was finished. I wonder if the one had anything to do with the other. She became president of Asylum Records, so that company now has the female gender's answer to Donald Trump as its leader. Thanks to Adina Estes, my daughter, for making copies of the hundreds of photographs that were considered for this project. I'm grateful to Jane Haley for helping to secure original pictures from wives scattered around the nation. Tom Carter and I have worked together on 2 books and are considering a third. He is my associate and friend, Mrs. George Jones. I appreciate the hospitality of Stella Howard and her staff at the Hampton Inn in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where I stayed for the 5 days of privacy needed to finish the manuscript. Special thanks to Linda Kramer for making the arrangements. I appreciate the more support from Rebecca Holden and Travis Carter and the research and legwork by Jane Haley. Bill Robinson has a sharp eye when searching for typographical errors. Dean Williamson was an ideal agent in that he never complained about my complaining. This was our 2nd book. He may soon leave publishing to go into psychology after so much practical experience with the neurotic. Diane Reverend is the perfect editor. She stays far enough away from a project to see its faults, yet close enough to correct them. I'd write for her anytime. I'm grateful to Evelyn Shiver who negotiated the terms of the Ronda Atkins chapter, it would have never been written about without Evelyn, who should moonlight as a diplomat. I appreciate the wives, most of whom had the courage to be honest and the wisdom to be tactful. Finally, a heartfelt thank you to Nancy Jones for staying with this undertaking when a lot of temperamental wives could have tempted her to leave it. Nancy and I worked together on her husband's autobiography, I Live to Tell It All by George Jones. She saved his career and she's beginning to do wonders for mine. Tom Carter. Foreword. I have co-written 9 books in 9 years that were largely the result of reader requests. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, where I am regularly exposed to country music fans, many of whom don't hesitate to ask personal questions about their favorite singers. It's easy to determine about whom they like to read. I eventually realized that the questions I was hearing frequently pertain not to the male superstars, but to their wives. Alright, what is Garth Brooks' wife really like? Was there a ring probe? Was it a recurring probe? Do you know Mrs. Alan Jackson? How did she meet Alan? Does Mrs. Billy Ray Cyrus cook and clean house? Does Mrs. John Michael Montgomery think that he cheats since he's so handsome and all? Does Mrs. Kenny Rogers worry about the age difference with her husband? You get the idea. Perhaps a question I've heard most frequently has come from single women. How can I meet and marry a country music star? Many have wanted to know. I've traveled the United States and Canada with many country luminaries, and whenever I'm on the road, the questions about the Nashville wives continue. I don't think I've ever had an extended conversation about a male star without eventually being asked about his wife, if he had one. The idea of writing a book about Nashville celebrity wives was an idea whose time had come and was even overdue. I didn't want to simply interview the wives. That seemed clinical and impersonal. I wanted to get to know those I did not already know personally. I had dined in many of their homes and had traveled in their tour buses and had even held their youngsters. Nonetheless, I figured many wives would not talk to me as openly as they would talk to one of their peers, another Nashville wife. So I approached the Dean of Nashville Wives, Mrs. George Nancy Jones, and asked if she'd like to write a book about the wives and let me assist. She thought long and hard. She was familiar with my work, and as I had written a book with George in 1995. The text had been frank, and she wondered how eager the wives would be to talk frankly about their marriages. Would they regard this project as intrusive? Would she make enemies of her friends? How candid should the text be? Nancy and I talked intermittently for about a year, then embarked on the project in the winter of 1997. We soon discovered an interesting quandary. Some of the wives would talk only to Nancy. They were shy in front of me, even though their remarks were eventually going to be made public. Nancy interviewed those women by herself. Others wanted to be interviewed only by me for the same reason in reverse. They were embarrassed about discussing personal things in front of Nancy, their friend. They found intimate talk easier with the comparative stranger. I often asked those wives questions from a list that Nancy helped prepare. Nancy similarly often asks wives questions from a list prepared by me. 2 wives wanted to meet me without Nancy in a hotel room. That setting is not unusual for personal talk due to the obvious privacy. Still others wanted to be interviewed simultaneously by both Nancy and me, and they were. The word interview is a misnomer. We often simply visited with some of the wives over lunch or hung out in their homes. Some wives wanted to chat in the presence of their husbands, but most did not. Others were uneasy about discussing their marriages face to face with either Nancy or me and wanted to talk on the phone. Nancy and I did separate telephone interviews and conference calls. All conversations were taped, recorded. The result, I think, is an astonishingly candid book. I've been surprised at what some of these wives have been willing to tell about themselves and their husbands. If I have one regret, it's that too much time is spent talking about the husbands and not enough about the wives. If it weren't for our husbands, you wouldn't want to talk to us, noted Barbara Brooks, wife of Kix Brooks of Brooks and Dunn. She has a valid point. Many wives, after being asked to talk about their lives, talked only about their husbands because their husbands are their lives. They freely said so. In some ways, this project was the most difficult I've ever undertaken. Many women on one hand wanted to be honest, on the other, they wanted to maintain appearances. A popular misconception about Nashville wives is that they live on Easy Street. Not true. No matter how much money and prestige accompany marriage to a celebrity, there is the element of regularly being a single married woman. Most wives in the following pages know what it's like not to know the whereabouts of the traveling husbands at 2 a.m. They know firsthand the frustration of having to handle crisis with children while their husband is on the road. They've had to live with damaged reports about a husband's behavior that are often no more than published lies. They know what it's like to wait for a month for a man to come home for 2 days, and then he spends them sleeping. I made some genuine friendships with some of the wives despite the fact that people often don't like portraits of themselves. Some of the wives exhibited behavior that was difficult, if not impossible, before the writing process even began. Nancy arranged an interview with one wife, for example, through her publicist. The publicist insisted that the wife would claim she had posed for a magazine that published nude photographs. Sure enough, the woman said she posed, but she said she decided against publishing the pictures as she did not want to upset her father. Nancy and I wrote a chapter that included that information. The wife subsequently claimed she never said she posed. I played her tape-recorded interview, and there were her own words saying she had posed. What was going on? On the same tape, she said she had no inhibitions about nudity. The wife's actions and reactions were laced with so much apparent denial and so many apparent conflicts that Nancy and I elected not to put her in this book. I hate that. She was a pleasant, bright, and attractive woman whose candor, if it could have been sordid, would have been fascinating. There was another wife who was among the most gracious women of all, at first. Nancy and I met her in her office. She wanted to see me again, and I returned without Nancy. The wife was refreshingly open and struggled to make her comments as clear and as accurate as possible. Nancy and I truly appreciated her intensity. We spent perhaps 50 hours writing and rewriting her chapter, and she continued to speed us information. She, through an assistant, called a half-dozen times. Consequently, I felt I owed her something when someone attacked her marriage. The attacker wanted to know how to publish hurtful accusations. I would have no part of it. The accuser claimed to be a representative of someone in the medical community who had allegedly treated the wife after repeated batterings by her husband. I didn't believe that. I tried to call the wife to warn her that the rumor was circulating. The accuser had credibility and wanted to sell the story to a national tabloid. I talked to the wife's personal assistant, to a family member, and to someone on her management team. None would put me through to her. Some of the Nashville wives have inflated opinions of their importance. They see themselves as hillbilly Princess Dianas. I was earnestly trying to help a woman who had been good to me and to thwart the battering junk before it found its way into print. But the wife is not about to take my call. She has simply become furious, not at the message, but at the messenger, me. She called Nancy and said that I was investigating her. Investigating? I wasn't calling for purposes of publication. I was calling to avoid publication of false and damaging information. The wife apparently didn't understand, much less appreciate the favor I was trying to do. Enough about this book, and on to the book itself. Besides, this isn't my book anyhow. It is Nancy's, who participated in the writing and was made privy to every chapter and photograph before publication. I, however, am solely responsible for this foreword. Tom Carter.